as a university recruiter for Twitter. And that is a very different kind of profession for me than the one that I have built my entire career post college around. To make it short, and we can get into my background more as we go, but why I am doing university recruiting now is because I saw an opportunity to give back to a company that has given so much to me. It was really, for me, I had already been at Twitter for a year. I had been working on Twitter Moments as an editorial curator, and the company reached out to everybody and basically said, we want to rethink our strategy with university recruiting. And part of that rethinking is who we bring on board. And we want two people who come from the company, from within the company, who already work at Twitter, who know why Twitter is a great place to work, to help go out on campuses around the country and spread the word, elevate the brand. And so I took that job because it seemed, one, that it would be pretty easy for me to do. I don't have a problem talking about why Twitter is a great place to work. And two, I saw an opportunity to also create a pipeline of diverse students and young people who were really passionate about Twitter to be able to kind of help or at least have some input and influence on the pipeline would be really, really would be something that I would appreciate. And so that's why I took the job now.
Awesome. So I know you attended Howard University. So tell us what your first steps were coming out of college. What did you find yourself doing as you exited, and even like the internships you did, or if you did any? Tell us about that.
So I majored in print journalism at Howard University, and being a part of the journalism program, in the School of Communications, what they drill in you very early on is that you have to do internships, and that shouldn't. I don't think that that's just unique to Howard University, but I do think that it's unique to the profession of journalism because journalism is a trade first and foremost. So it's not like being a doctor, obviously, and it's not like being a lawyer or things like that. Basically, it's not a profession that you could break into, or the only way that you could break into is through the classes you take and the education that you get. It's at your school. It's all about the experience that you've had, where you've worked, and the kind of work that you have done outside of the classroom. So I knew very early that in order for me to be successful post college, I had to think very strategically about what kind of internships I wanted to take and where I wanted to go. And so one of the ways that I did that was I took an internship at Five Magazine the summer between my junior and my senior year. And I was very focused on making sure that that internship would be where I would plant the seeds to possibly work at Vibe after I graduated. That's a place that I wanted to work out the most. I certainly was not going to discriminate or care about where I would work after I graduated from college, but I was aiming to work there, and I just felt like, hey, why would I not at least try to intern at the place that I'm trying to work at the most? So that was a lesson that I always try to pass on. Like, I get it. You probably want a job right after you graduate, but you should be aiming high. And what I mean by that is not prestige, but the thing that you value the most and the place that you value the most. I meet a lot of students who I could tell they just want a job. And that's cool. I get that. But you should really be like targeting the places that you want to work at the most first. Like, you shouldn't be settling for like, oh, I'll take any place that hires me. You never know if the company that you really, really want to work at is a company that is hiring and looking for a student like yourself. So my but I say all that to say, like, I really was willing to do journalism anywhere that would allow me to do that, and that worked to my benefit. So by the time I was graduating from Howard, there wasn't really any opportunities that seemed to be opening up at Vibe. I kept in touch and kept warm relationships with everybody that I had made connections with throughout my senior year, but nobody was really hitting me back and saying, hey, we have this opportunity for you. So I had to branch out and look elsewhere. And one of the places that I looked, I mean, like, I was sending my clips and my resume to play like newspapers in North Dakota. Like that's how much I just did. Wherever they were willing to hire me, I was willing to go, knowing that long term I could probably end up where I wanted to be. So one of the places that I looked at was Wired magazine. This is 2004, just to give you an idea of how old I really am. And I was really I was like, okay, well, they have a fact checking opportunity at Wired. And for those who may not know, fact checking has kind of become a lost art in this day and age. But that was for a very long time pretty much the only way you could get into magazines is by being a fact checker. It was like the entry level position on magazine editorial staffs. So I submitted my application to Wired because one thing I did at my Vibe internship was I put a lot of time learning from the fact checking desk because I knew that that was the way that you got in. So I had like this internship, but I had this internship that I tailored specifically to learn about fact checking. So confidently, I submitted my application to Wired. Wired got back to me and they were interested in me. And so we got to that part of the interview process where they wanted to reach out to some of my references. And one of my references was a research director. Research is a fancy term that they give to fact checkers. The research director at Vibe Magazine. And they reached out to her. And after they reached out to her, she said, hey, Wired just got reached out to me about you possibly going to work for them. I told them nothing but great things, but you should also know that we have something up opening. We have something opening up at the research desk here, and if you're interested, we'd love to have you. So, of course, I was interested, and Wired reached out to me with an offer, and Vibe reached out to me with an offer. So I went from having like nothing to like two offers, right? And of course, I took the one at Vibe, and that wasn't a difficult decision to make. But the lesson there is, like I said, me being willing to take my to do what I loved anywhere is how I got to where I wanted to be, right? So yes, go for the companies that you want to work at. Hit them first because I just feel like that's like you owe that to yourself. You put in all this hard work, and you've admired some companies from afar. You owe it to yourself to aim high for the places that you want to work at the most, but do not close yourself off from any opportunity that's out there. Search high and low, and you'll never know how that can end up benefiting you. So that's what I did. I aimed high and low and anywhere in between, and I still ended up at the place that I wanted to be at.
That's really awesome. I mean, I feel like a lot of us feel sort of afraid to sort of put ourselves out there just because I think since we live in Alabama and it's like not as big of a network, I think we're all kind of worried about like what will happen if we try. If it's like, oh, well, I went here, I didn't go to like some like Ivy League or something. I shouldn't even try for that. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
My thoughts on that are like, I mean, believe it or not, I dealt with that a lot at Howard. Um, just knowing that there were two people that knew there were two kinds of people. Those who knew what Howard University was, right? It's a historically black college, and you kind of felt like, were they going to marginalize me? Were they going to think that I was not going to be like this inclusive candidate or I just felt like maybe some people had this idea of an HBCU candidate that I really was hoping wouldn't be held against me. And then there were people that didn't know what Howard University is at all. I mean, trust me, like there are people out there that don't know, haven't heard of Howard University, believe it or not. But I would say that you should not be worried about that sort of thing in terms of the fact that you are, when you go out there, right, there's nothing you can do against nepotism. Like, I I wish there was, but people are going to look at the schools that they went to, right, and the candidates from there. And yes, you may not have that huge network of graduates from your program out there in the industry, but that still should not hold you back and should not, like, you just got to let go of that fear. You really, really do. The One of the ways that I could tell you around it, if you're ever self-conscious about the fact that you, like, man, they're not getting back to me because they see my Alabama address, um, which I moved back home after I graduated. um, but I would say don't be afraid to put another address on there. Like, put down the address of somebody that you know. Don't not them. But I was using a New York address, a California address, and a DC address. I had three different resumes with three different addresses on them. And look, it didn't happen to me, but it happened to a friend of mine who faked their New York address, had a friend in New York. They put down their New York address. They were living in San Jose, and they got a call from NBC in New York. They wanted to interview them. And so they went ahead and they like did this whole thing where like they they got the call, they set up an interview, and they were on the first flight out so that they could go ahead and make it. And it never came up. Like, do you really live in New York? Like, that's not a thing, right? But they appeared that they did. And I think there is legitimate, like, I do think some geography discrimination that goes on, and I always say that because I don't think companies want to pay for relocation fees, right? So that's a whole thing. So if you can get around that in any way, if you have a cousin who has a cousin who lives in New York City, use New York City. Like, just reach out to them and get that permission, and you're good. But don't be afraid to like um, do something like that. And that's the only reason why you should be concerned. The rest of it, like where you went to school, no, that's not something that you should be concerned
Awesome. So I want to know what like the difference has been for you working somewhere like Vibe that was primarily like a print publication to like working at Twitter, which is almost 100% digital. How has that been for you?
well, it's been a huge difference because of the fact that like um, uh, uh, there's two things. One, I'm working at both companies for different reasons, and as you grow in your career, you will find yourself um, moving in a direction that best suits you for where you are at that time in your life. Okay, so I was very much the Vibe reader when I went to Vibe, and I wanted to contribute to that. Twitter was not around when I graduated from college, so it's not like this place that I went to. Like, I graduated from college and I was like, I want to work at Twitter. Like, it did not exist at all. Uh, but by the time an opportunity came around, which was a year or so ago, Twitter was exactly the kind of place that I wanted to work at. And so the differences, a lot of the differences are because of who I am. So I could tell you like, okay, so Vibe, there was music blasting every day, and it really was like people just did not wear headphones. Everybody just turned up the volume on their speakers, and it was like young, it was diverse, it was I was sitting alongside other fellow journalists. Like everybody there did what I did on some level or another, right? And then you had fashion people, then you had the photography department, and then you had the designers, right? And we were all like these creative people. And you had the business people sitting on the other side, but even the business people were creative people. For instance, I don't know, has anybody heard of the comedian Damian Lemon? Anybody familiar with him? He's on Guy Code. He hosted a show on True TV called Comedy Knockout. Um, but he was working in marketing when I was at Vibe, right? And he would just go at night and do stand up comedy, like open mic nights, right? Like now he's a legitimate like tours all over the country and stuff like that, right? So even those people were very very creative. So that's just a different kind of culture than the culture that's here at Twitter. Not corporate either, but engineers, right? Like I'm meeting computer engineers, software engineers. I'm meeting business people. I'm meeting data scientists. I am meeting people. I went at Vibe, like I was dealing with people who like dropped out of college and were still my boss, right? In at Twitter, I'm meeting PhDs, right? Like I work alongside some PhDs. So it's all very very different. Twitter. We get free food at Twitter. We never got free food at Vibe. So I could go on and on about the differences. But I didn't come to work at Twitter because they had free food. I think I wanted the job because I knew they had free food. But I'm just a different person now than what I was. And also, the industry is different, right? Like, so depending on how you want to make your impact in the world, that's going to play a lot into where you end up wanting to work. I have one thing that remains consistent from my time at Vibe to my time at Twitter is that I care very much about media in general, right? And being a part of a company that is responsible for sending messages out into the world. Vibe was doing that. Twitter is doing that. They're doing that completely differently, right? Um, but me wanting to always make an impact at companies that did that are is the consistent thing that has taken me from Vibe to Twitter. I just want to make an impact in a different way. I came out wanting to work at Vibe because I loved hip hop and I loved the culture around hip hop. Now I care about much more than that, and that's why I'm at Twitter, right? Because Twitter is not just a place where they're talking about hip hop and everything. Like we have the president elect tweeting every single day, and like that's a unique. I don't want to say it's a problem, but that's a unique thing to have. You know what I'm saying? Like I am actually a part of a company that is where the president elect chooses to comment on all sorts of things. So it's a unique issue to have. And I never had that problem or that issue at Vibe. You know what I mean? At Vibe, the most presidential thing we were dealing with was how to get a photo shoot with Obama when he was taking office. That's a different thing entirely. And I covered the inauguration for Vibe in 2008. Like that was like great and like awesome and everything. But now I think I don't look at it like, okay, I got to be on the ground um, dealing with like reporting from the inauguration of this next president. I'd rather be at a company that's thinking about ways that we could handle the volume of tweet activity that we're going to have when this thing comes out. So, me being fluid is what allowed me to adapt to these different changes and the differences between Vibe and Twitter.
Awesome. So I've been following you on Twitter since like, you were working at the New York Post. So tell us how you got connected with Twitter and how that happened.
So there is. the social way and there is the professional way. The professional way is that I came on board as an editorial curator for Twitter Moments. So, by show of hands, who has Twitter? Okay, look at that. God. So, are some of you, most of you, familiar with Twitter Moments? Right? Okay, so every single moment that you see is created by somebody here on our editorial team. Um, we use basically an editor. We have an editorial mindset when it comes to which what moments are going to be created, which tweets go into those moments. We look at every single moment as telling a story through tweets. So there has to be a beginning, middle, and end. There has to be best practices that you can apply to pretty much any major media outlet in the world. You could apply it. We apply those standards to Twitter Moments. So when they were building this product, they were building Twitter Moments. They wanted to staff it with people who had journalism experience. So I professionally, I fit the profile of the person of the type of person they wanted to have on the team. But the way I got an interview was because of my connections of my network of people, right? So like my girlfriend's former roommate worked at Twitter, right? So that helped. And then I had another friend who had a friend who worked here at Twitter as well. And so I know you guys are probably thinking, well, I'm not dating anybody that's like connected with somebody that, right? But you never know. You could be like the the idea of networking sometimes seems very, very overwhelming and seems like more work than we're willing to do. I know that's how I felt about networking for a very, very long time. I think after a while, though, when you reach a certain point in your professional career, networking comes so freaking natural to you because like you're just surrounded by people who have like the keys to certain opportunities that you want. Like I went from using bosses and stuff like that for references to now like colleagues, like coworkers, people who I'm friends with as my as my references. So I had a unique opportunity to actually be um, seen by people at Twitter, and and I was prepared for it, right? So like this idea that you just got to know somebody isn't enough. It's also about you being able to put up, um, present yourself as the person that people are saying you are to other people. So that's how I did it. I had experience and I had connections. Those two things are what allowed me to get in. You know what I mean? And so I think that you can't have one without the other. You should never try to have one without the other. Twitter is always hiring. Like Twitter has tons and tons of jobs, but I'm not qualified for the majority of them. I was uniquely qualified for this one, and so it was um, it was just a matter of me making sure that the people that I knew that worked at Twitter knew how bad I wanted to be here. And you know, I know that the New York Post seems like a very unlikely place in terms of like, yeah, like I don't know anybody else here that can say, yeah, I started at the New York Post and I ended up at Twitter. But that should just let you know, like wherever you're at, that doesn't mean that you can't get to the next thing. Like, don't ever try. Well, New York Post is a newspaper and Twitter is a social media company. How do I, what? Like, I don't get it. Like, no, that's look at the position itself, look at the unique qualifications they want in a person, and then understand that you are that person a lot of times. So just don't close yourself off and don't look at like everything as such a wide jump. There's a thread between the place that you're at and the place that you want to be.
Cool. So, a couple of us have been talking about diversity in the workplace and like how important that is to like some of us. So, like, tell us about like what you think about I guess like in terms of like if say I want to work at X company, and X company is great, but I don't know anything about like their stats on diversity, how like the type of people that work there. How should we go about looking for somewhere like that to work, somewhere that's diverse that we know we can feel comfortable being at? Because I can tell you feel very comfortable working at Twitter. So just tell us about like what you think about how we should go about that.
So the best question, one of the best questions that you can ask any place that you're interviewing at is, um,